The Amazon rainforest, the largest tropical rainforest in the world, spans over 5.5 million square kilometers across 9 countries in South America, with the majority lying in Brazil. Often referred to as the lungs of the earth, the Amazon plays an irreplaceable role in regulating global climate by absorbing vast amounts of carbon dioxide and producing oxygen through photosynthesis. Covering an area larger than the continental United States, this vibrant ecosystem is home to unparalleled biodiversity, housing an estimated 10% of all known species on Earth, from the elusive jaguar to ancient plant species and undiscovered microorganisms. However, this ecological powerhouse faces an accelerating crisis. Over the last 50 years, deforestation, agricultural expansion, and deliberate burning have claimed more than 17% of the Amazon. To put this into perspective, this loss is equivalent to an area roughly the size of France. The scale of destruction is unprecedented, with satellite data revealing thousands of fires ravaging the region annually, especially during the dry season from July to October. Fires in the Amazon are often intentionally ignited to clear land, but under dry conditions exacerbated by climate change, they frequently spiral out of control, spreading across vast distances. The significance of these fires extends far beyond South America. The Amazon's carbon storage capacity is critical for mitigating climate change. As trees burn, they release the carbon stored in their trunks, branches, and leaves into the atmosphere, contributing to global greenhouse gas levels. In recent years, some areas of the Amazon have even become carbon emitters rather than carbon sinks, a stark warning about the forest's declining health. Despite the devastating consequences, the drivers behind these fires persist. The expansion of soybean farming, cattle ranching, and illegal logging are among the main culprits. In particular, the global demand for beef and soy has incentivized large-scale deforestation, with vast swathes of rainforest converted into farmland and pasture. This industrial-scale activity not only threatens wildlife, but also disrupts the hydrological cycle, leading to less rainfall and increased vulnerability to droughts. As of 2024, the situation is exacerbated by the alarming rate at which deforestation enables fires to encroach into previously untouched areas. These fires not only destroy trees, but also impact the soil, making it harder for new growth to take root. This has set off a domino effect, further weakening the Amazon's ability to regenerate and increasing the likelihood of a catastrophic tipping point where large portions of the forest could transform into a savanna-like landscape. In the following parts, we will explore the human activities driving these fires, their far-reaching consequences on local communities and indigenous populations, and the efforts being made to curb this ecological disaster. The wildfires consuming the Amazon rainforest are not a natural phenomenon. Unlike many forest ecosystems that rely on periodic natural fires for regeneration, the Amazon is not adapted to burning and owes much of its current crisis to human activities. Fires are deliberately set in most cases, driven by agricultural expansion, illegal logging, and the rising global demand for natural resources. Farmers and ranchers often use slash and burn methods to clear land for crops and grazing. This practice, while efficient for rapid land clearing, has devastating consequences for the Amazon. During the dry season, which typically spans from July to October, these fires frequently escape their intended boundaries and spread into surrounding forest areas. In particularly dry years, exacerbated by climate change, these controlled burns can rapidly ignite massive wildfires, engulfing large sections of the forest. Illegal logging operations further compound the problem. After trees are felled and removed, the leftover debris, such as branches and leaves, is left to dry and becomes highly flammable fuel for fires. Logging roads also create pathways into previously inaccessible areas of the forest, enabling more widespread deforestation and the expansion of slash and burn practices. Satellite imagery from organizations like INPE, Brazil's National Institute for Space Research, reveals how these human-made scars on the landscape facilitate fire outbreaks. The expansion of industrial-scale agriculture is another significant contributor. Brazil is the world's largest exporter of soybeans and beef, and the demand for farmland to produce these commodities has surged in recent decades. The Cerrado region, which borders the Amazon, has already seen extensive conversion into agricultural land, but pressure is increasingly shifting toward the rainforest itself. In particular, soy plantations and cattle pastures have driven massive deforestation, with an estimated 2/3 of all deforested areas now used for livestock grazing. Adding to the crisis is the complex interplay of political and economic factors. Enforcement of environmental regulations has weakened over time, with insufficient resources allocated to monitoring and penalizing illegal activities. Meanwhile, certain political agendas have favored short-term economic growth over environmental sustainability, prioritizing agricultural exports and land development at the expense of forest conservation. Reports from 2024 indicate a troubling increase in deforestation-related activities, with weakened oversight emboldening illegal loggers and land speculators. The economic reliance on these destructive practices creates a vicious cycle. For many farmers and loggers, these activities are seen as a necessity for survival in a challenging economic climate. Government incentives and subsidies for agriculture can inadvertently encourage further deforestation, as small-scale farmers clear forested land to qualify for property rights or financial benefits. The fires also pose significant risks to nearby communities. Smoke from the burning forest releases fine particulate matter into the atmosphere, leading to severe air quality issues and health problems for residents. In 2019, fires were so widespread that the city of São Paulo, located thousands of kilometers away, experienced daytime darkness due to thick smoke covering the sky. This serves as a grim reminder of how interconnected the Amazon is with the broader region and the planet. As we continue, we will delve into the far-reaching environmental consequences of these fires, examining their impact on biodiversity, indigenous communities, and the global climate. The Amazon rainforest, one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth, is facing unprecedented environmental damage from the fires. These fires are not just destroying trees. They are threatening the delicate balance of a unique habitat that supports millions of species of plants, animals, and microorganisms, many of which are found nowhere else on Earth. With every hectare lost to fire, countless species lose their homes and food sources. The Amazon is home to an estimated 10% of all known species, including iconic creatures like jaguars, harpy eagles, and pink river dolphins. Many of these species are already endangered due to habitat destruction and fragmentation. The fires exacerbate this problem, often burning areas critical to their survival, such as nesting sites and feeding grounds. Insects, which play crucial roles in pollination and nutrient cycling, are particularly vulnerable. As fires sweep through the forest floor, they destroy the microhabitats these creatures rely on. Similarly, amphibians, which are highly sensitive to environmental changes, suffer catastrophic losses during fires. The ripple effect of these losses disrupts the food chain, impacting predators and other interconnected species. The Amazon rainforest is a vital carbon sink, absorbing billions of tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere annually. This process helps mitigate the effects of global warming. However, when trees burn, they release stored carbon back into the atmosphere. In 2019, the Amazon fires emitted an estimated 500 million metric tons of carbon dioxide, a stark reminder of how these events accelerate climate change. The destruction of the Amazon also compromises its ability to regulate local and global weather patterns. The forest generates massive amounts of water vapor, which contributes to regional rainfall and influences weather systems as far away as the United States and Europe. With reduced forest cover, this natural cycle is disrupted, leading to drier conditions in the Amazon basin and beyond. The fires also have a devastating impact on the soil. The nutrient-rich topsoil in the Amazon is highly dependent on the organic matter provided by the forest itself. When fires burn this organic layer, the soil becomes less fertile, making it harder for the forest to recover. This degradation also increases the likelihood of desertification, particularly in areas already affected by deforestation and agricultural activity. Furthermore, the loss of tree cover exposes the soil to direct sunlight and rainfall, leading to erosion and the washing away of nutrients. Over time, this can transform once thriving forest land into barren wasteland, unsuitable for either agriculture or reforestation efforts. The fires do not only affect flora and fauna, they also devastate indigenous communities who have lived in harmony with the forest for centuries. These communities depend on the Amazon for their food, shelter, and cultural identity. As fires encroach on their territories, they lose not only their homes, but also sacred sites and traditional knowledge tied to the land. The situation is compounded by the encroachment of outsiders, loggers, miners, and ranchers, who take advantage of the chaos caused by the fires. In some cases, indigenous groups are forced to abandon their lands entirely, further threatening their way of life and eroding the cultural diversity that is an integral part of the Amazon's heritage. The environmental impact of the Amazon fires extends far beyond South America. The loss of carbon sequestration capacity accelerates climate change, while the release of fine particulate matter into the atmosphere affects air quality on a global scale. The fires also contribute to the loss of genetic resources that could hold the key to future medical breakthroughs, agricultural improvements, and other scientific advancements. Next, we will examine the international response to the Amazon fires, the role of conservation efforts, and what steps must be taken to preserve this vital ecosystem for future generations. As the Amazon rainforest faces its most critical challenges, the international community has started to respond with increasing urgency. Governments, environmental organizations, and activists worldwide are working to address the devastation caused by fires, deforestation, and climate change. This final section examines these efforts and the path forward for protecting one of Earth's most vital ecosystems. Global awareness of the Amazon's plight surged in 2019 when the fires reached a catastrophic scale, prompting international outcry. Since then, many countries have offered financial and technical assistance to Brazil and other Amazonian nations to combat deforestation and illegal activities. Programs like the Amazon Fund, initially spearheaded by Norway and Germany, have allocated millions of dollars to conservation projects. However, these funds are often mired in political controversies, with critics questioning their allocation and effectiveness. The European Union and the United Nations have also been vocal in their support for preserving the Amazon, emphasizing the region's role in combating climate change. The 2021 Glasgow Climate Pact included commitments from multiple nations to curb deforestation by 2030. While these pledges signal progress, the actual implementation and enforcement of such measures remain critical challenges. Indigenous groups, local communities, and environmental activists have been at the forefront of efforts to protect the Amazon. Organizations like Greenpeace and the World Wildlife Fund (WWF) work alongside indigenous leaders to monitor illegal activities, reforest degraded areas, and advocate for stricter environmental policies. Activists like the Brazilian indigenous leader Sônia Guajajara have brought international attention to the Amazon's plight, highlighting the struggles faced by indigenous peoples and the importance of their stewardship. Grassroots campaigns, including global social media movements, have also galvanized public support, putting pressure on corporations and governments to adopt more sustainable practices. Advancements in technology are playing a pivotal role in the fight to save the Amazon. Satellite imaging and remote sensing are now being used to monitor deforestation and detect illegal logging in real time. Organizations like Global Forest Watch provide accessible data that allows governments and conservationists to respond more effectively to emerging threats. In addition, research into forest regeneration is uncovering new methods for restoring damaged areas. Agroforestry, a practice that combines agriculture with tree planting, offers a promising solution for sustainable land use. Scientists are also studying how natural processes such as seed dispersal by animals can be leveraged to accelerate reforestation efforts. Despite these efforts, significant hurdles remain. Weak enforcement of environmental laws, corruption, and economic pressures continue to undermine conservation initiatives. In some cases, political leaders have prioritized short-term economic gains over long-term environmental sustainability, granting permits for mining and agriculture in protected areas. The impact of climate change further complicates these efforts. Rising temperatures, prolonged droughts, and erratic rainfall patterns are pushing the Amazon closer to a tipping point, beyond which large portions of the forest could transform into savanna. This shift would have catastrophic consequences, including the release of vast amounts of stored carbon and the loss of irreplaceable biodiversity. The future of the Amazon rainforest depends on a concerted, sustained effort from individuals, governments, and organizations worldwide. Education and awareness are crucial, as understanding the importance of the Amazon can drive public support for conservation policies. Reducing the global demand for commodities like beef, soy, and timber, often linked to deforestation, can also lessen the economic incentives for destructive practices. Reforestation projects and the protection of remaining forest areas are essential steps in reversing the damage. Supporting indigenous rights and empowering local communities to manage their lands can further strengthen these efforts, as these groups have a proven track record of sustainable stewardship. The Amazon rainforest is at a crossroads. Its survival is not just a regional issue, but a global one, affecting the climate, biodiversity, and future of life on Earth. By acting collectively and decisively, there is still hope to preserve this vital ecosystem for generations to come. The Black Saturday bushfires, which ravaged the Australian state of Victoria on February 7, 2009, stand as one of the most devastating natural disasters in Australian history. It wasn't just a single fire, but rather a collection of more than 400 individual fires that sparked across the state, burning millions of acres of land. What made this disaster so catastrophic was the perfect storm of extreme weather conditions, combined with the years of drought and dry vegetation, which set the stage for an event of unimaginable destruction. On the day of the fires, the temperatures soared to record-breaking heights. In many areas, the mercury climbed to over 46 degrees Celsius, or 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Such extreme heat was coupled with hot, dry winds reaching speeds of up to 120 kilometers per hour or 75 miles per hour. These conditions, combined with a prolonged drought that had left the land parched, created a recipe for disaster. The land was so dry that even the smallest spark could ignite a massive fire. The fires that started on Black Saturday quickly grew out of control, fueled by these extreme weather conditions. The dry forests, grasslands, and bush areas provided an abundance of flammable material that allowed the flames to spread with incredible speed. As a result, many of these fires became megafires, fires that were far too large and powerful for conventional firefighting methods to control. The challenge for the firefighters was immense. While Victoria has a well-established firefighting force, the scale and intensity of the fires on that day were unprecedented. The fires spread across both remote and populated areas, making it difficult for emergency services to keep up. In some cases, they had no choice but to retreat as the flames advanced faster than they could respond. The fires had a terrifying ability to change direction with the wind, creating unpredictable and dangerous conditions for those trying to fight them. Despite the efforts of thousands of firefighters, many towns were engulfed in the flames. The speed with which the fires spread meant that many people had little to no time to evacuate. As night fell, the fires continued to rage, leaving communities devastated. In total, the fires claimed the lives of 173 people, many of whom were trapped by the flames or unable to escape in time. Hundreds of others were injured and thousands of homes were destroyed, leaving countless families without shelter. The intense heat also made the fires exceptionally dangerous. In addition to the flames themselves, the fires generated massive amounts of heat and smoke, creating a deadly combination of air pollution and unbearable temperatures. In some areas, the heat was so extreme that it could melt the metal of vehicles, and the smoke was thick enough to make it nearly impossible to breathe. This catastrophic event didn't just affect those in the path of the flames. The air pollution from the fires was widespread, impacting communities far from the fire zones. Smoke traveled hundreds of kilometers, blanketing cities like Melbourne, turning the sky an eerie orange, and causing respiratory issues for residents. The impact was felt by the entire state, and even beyond, with the fires leaving a profound mark on Australia's history. The Black Saturday bushfires were a tragedy that left scars on the landscape and the people who lived through them. As we move forward in this series, we'll delve deeper into how the fires unfolded, the heroic efforts of the firefighters, and the long road to recovery that followed in the aftermath. But for now, it's important to understand that the conditions leading up to Black Saturday set the stage for one of the most destructive and unforgettable days in Australian history. Stay tuned as we continue to explore the events that unfolded on Black Saturday and the aftermath that reshaped communities and lives forever. As the sun rose on February 7, 2009, the sky over Victoria was an ominous shade of red, hinting at the disaster that was about to unfold. The weather was already reaching extreme levels by early morning, with temperatures rising quickly and the winds picking up speed. By midday, it was clear that this would not be an ordinary fire season. The fire warnings issued by emergency services were upgraded to catastrophic levels in many parts of the state, meaning that conditions were so extreme that fire could not be controlled once it started. The fires began to spread rapidly, their reach extending into the vast and dry bushland of Victoria. At first, it seemed like it might just be another bad fire season, but by the afternoon, it was clear this was something far worse. The fires were relentless, with some burning so hot that they created their own weather systems. The intensity of the flames generated powerful updrafts, pulling in more oxygen, which further fueled the fires and made them burn even hotter. In some places, the firestorms generated winds of up to 120 kilometers per hour, making it almost impossible for firefighters to get close. The flames didn't just spread on the ground, they were carried by the winds across long distances. Spot fires, which occur when embers are carried by the wind to start fires far from the original blaze, were a major issue. These spot fires began popping up in areas that hadn't been touched by the initial flames, further complicating efforts to contain the fires. For many, the fire seemed to come out of nowhere, catching them off guard in a way that few had ever experienced. As the fires spread uncontrollably, towns and rural communities in their path found themselves in immediate danger. Some towns, like King Lake and Marysville, would never be the same again. The winds were so powerful that they carried burning embers and sparks miles away from the flames, igniting new areas and stretching the fire's reach. The local fire brigades, who had been trained for such emergencies, were overwhelmed, and emergency services scrambled to organize evacuation efforts. One of the biggest challenges faced during the early hours of the bushfires was the lack of communication and coordination. The scale of the fire was so vast that emergency services had difficulty tracking the fire's progress and determining where it would strike next. The fires were spreading unpredictably, making it nearly impossible to evacuate people ahead of time. In some instances, residents were advised to stay in their homes and defend them. But the speed at which the fires spread meant that even those precautions weren't enough to save them. The extreme heat was a significant factor in the devastation. As the fire spread, it ignited trees, homes, and vehicles alike. The temperature near the flames was so high that metal objects melted and concrete cracked. Many people had no choice but to flee into the dense smoke and heat, hoping to reach safety, while others stayed behind trying to save their homes, only to be overtaken by the flames. One of the most harrowing elements of that day was how quickly people were forced to make life or death decisions. The danger was so immediate that evacuation routes became blocked, and roads became impassable due to the fires. Entire families were separated, with some members trapped in homes or caught in the chaos while others managed to escape. In these moments, the fires proved just how fast disaster could strike, and how unprepared many were for the sheer scale of destruction that was unfolding. As the day wore on, the fires continued to rage, and emergency services were stretched to their limits. Despite the overwhelming challenges, firefighters and emergency responders continued to risk their lives in an attempt to save others. Many crews were unable to reach some of the more isolated towns, and some found themselves battling the flames just to survive, as the fires turned into walls of heat and smoke. At this point, it was clear that this would not be a fight that could be won in a single day. The Black Saturday bushfires were now in full swing, and their consequences would echo for years to come. Stay tuned as we explore the devastation of these fires in greater detail and the human stories of survival, loss, and resilience in the face of tragedy. By the evening of February 7th, 2009, the fires had become a full-blown catastrophe. Entire communities were in the direct path of the flames, with some towns completely wiped off the map. The impact of these fires was unlike anything seen before in Australia. As the fires continued to rage, many people found themselves in the fight for their lives. They were not only battling the relentless inferno, but also the suffocating heat and thick, toxic smoke that made it almost impossible to breathe. One of the most severe impacts was on the town of Marysville, located just outside the Yarra Ranges National Park. This community, home to around 500 people, was decimated. The fires roared through with such intensity that the town was practically obliterated. Buildings were reduced to ash, and the iconic landmarks, which once made the town a popular destination, were gone. In just a few hours, Marysville was transformed from a vibrant town into a ghost town with only a handful of structures left standing. Some residents were fortunate enough to escape the flames, but many others weren't as lucky. Tragically, 47 people lost their lives in the Marysville area alone. For those who survived the fires, the immediate aftermath was a nightmare. Roads had been blocked and many of the evacuation routes were impassable. Residents were forced to seek shelter wherever they could find it. King Lake, another community hard hit by the fires, saw residents flee into nearby forests and local buildings in a desperate bid for safety. In an act of incredible bravery, a group of people took shelter in the local pub, hoping it would provide enough protection from the flames. The temperature outside was so intense that it felt like the air itself was burning, and the heat inside the pub was almost unbearable. But somehow, despite the suffocating conditions, the group survived the inferno that engulfed much of the surrounding area. While many found refuge in these makeshift shelters, others were not as fortunate. The fires moved so quickly that some people found themselves trapped in their homes, unable to escape as the walls of fire drew closer. Many of these individuals were forced to make the unimaginable decision to either attempt to flee into the flames or wait it out, hoping the fire would pass them by. For some, the danger was so great that they had to dive into pools or nearby bodies of water to survive, while others huddled together in their homes hoping for a miracle. In the midst of all this chaos, the efforts of emergency services became even more crucial. Firefighters were working around the clock, but they were overwhelmed by the scale of the fires. The fire's unpredictability made it difficult for fire crews to get ahead of the destruction. They were constantly on the move, trying to protect homes and evacuate people, but their progress was often slowed by the thick smoke and rapidly changing fire fronts. In some cases, firefighters had to retreat to avoid being trapped by the flames themselves. Despite the overwhelming challenges, they persevered, even when faced with near impossible odds. At the same time, the devastation was not just limited to the loss of homes. The impact on the natural environment was catastrophic. Victoria's bushland, home to many native species of animals and plants, was decimated by the fires. Habitats that had taken centuries to develop were wiped out in a matter of hours. For example, areas that once supported koala populations were turned to ash, and countless other species were left without homes. The environmental toll of the fires would continue to be felt long after the flames were extinguished. As the fires began to subside, the true scale of the devastation became clear. It wasn't just the physical destruction that was heartbreaking, but also the psychological scars that would remain for those affected. Families who had lost everything were now faced with the daunting task of rebuilding their lives from the ground up. The fires had not only taken their homes, but also their sense of security. The psychological impact of such an event can be overwhelming, and it would take years for many survivors to fully recover. But even in the face of this incredible devastation, there were stories of resilience. Communities, despite being broken, found ways to come together. Volunteers flooded into the affected areas, offering their help, support, and resources. The kindness and generosity shown by strangers in the aftermath of the fires were overwhelming. Donations of food, clothing, and other supplies poured in from all corners of the country. People from across Australia banded together to support the survivors, and the spirit of unity was one of the most powerful outcomes from such a tragic event. As we reflect on the heartbreaking devastation caused by the Black Saturday bushfires, we remember not just the destruction, but also the strength and resilience of the individuals and communities who survived. In the face of overwhelming loss, they found ways to rebuild, to recover, and to honor the memory of those they lost. The physical damage was staggering, but the emotional and psychological toll was equally profound. In the next part, we will delve deeper into the response from emergency services, the bravery shown by so many, and how the survivors began to pick up the pieces of their lives. Stay tuned. As the flames from the Black Saturday bushfires finally began to subside, the immense task of rebuilding and recovery took center stage. The scale of the destruction was so great that it required a coordinated response from all levels of government, emergency services, and the public. The fires had left thousands of families without homes, entire communities in ruins, and many victims struggling with the emotional scars left behind by the devastating experience. The immediate priority was to provide relief to those who had been affected. In the days following the fires, emergency teams worked tirelessly to deliver food, water, and shelter to the survivors. Temporary shelters were set up, and displaced residents were given a place to stay while they began to process the extent of the damage. Volunteers flooded into the affected areas, offering their time and resources to help with the cleanup and support efforts. The response was nothing short of extraordinary, with communities coming together in the face of overwhelming tragedy. However, while the immediate response focused on providing relief, the longer-term recovery process was just as critical. Rebuilding homes and infrastructure was a monumental challenge, particularly in areas where entire towns had been reduced to rubble. In many places, families found themselves living in temporary accommodation for months, even years, as they awaited the construction of new homes. The emotional toll of losing everything and the difficulty of starting over weighed heavily on many survivors. One of the key aspects of the recovery process was the psychological support provided to those affected. The trauma of surviving such a catastrophic event left many with deep emotional scars. Counseling services were made available to help people deal with grief, loss, and post-traumatic stress. The psychological impact of the fires was a critical issue that had to be addressed for the well-being of the survivors. Mental health professionals worked tirelessly to offer support, but it was clear that the recovery would take time. The Black Saturday bushfires also had a lasting impact on Australia's approach to bushfire management. The sheer scale of the fires exposed weaknesses in the country's fire preparedness and response systems. In the wake of the tragedy, there was a widespread push for reform, with many calling for better coordination between emergency services and more effective public education on fire safety. It was evident that the response to future bushfire crises would need to be better organized and more efficient. A major reform that followed was the introduction of the Fire Ready program, which aimed to better inform the public about fire risks and the actions they could take to protect themselves. One of the biggest lessons learned was the importance of early warning systems and better communication between authorities and communities. In addition, the role of fire refuges, or designated safe zones for residents to seek shelter during fires, became a key area of focus. These changes were designed to ensure that the devastating loss of life experienced during the Black Saturday bushfires would not be repeated in future fires. Environmental recovery was another long-term challenge. Many areas that had been devastated by the fires had once been home to Australia's most unique and endangered wildlife. The destruction of habitats was a tragic blow to the country's rich biodiversity. Efforts to restore these environments included planting native vegetation and creating wildlife corridors to help animals return to their homes. Wildlife recovery programs also provided care and rehabilitation for injured animals, ensuring that some species could begin to recover from the damage caused by the fires. Another significant focus of the recovery was the restoration of infrastructure. Roads, bridges, and other essential structures had been destroyed or damaged by the fires, leaving many communities isolated. The rebuilding efforts required a vast amount of resources and coordination, with both government agencies and local communities working together to restore access to vital services. Beyond the physical rebuilding, the Black Saturday bushfires also left an indelible mark on the cultural fabric of Victoria. Communities that had been devastated by the fires began to rebuild not just their homes, but also their lives. For many, the fires brought an overwhelming sense of loss, but they also fostered a renewed sense of community and solidarity. Neighbors helped each other, strangers became friends, and entire towns began to come together again. The recovery process, while long and difficult, ultimately showcased the incredible resilience of the people of Victoria. While the fires of February 7th, 2009 will never be forgotten, the Black Saturday bushfires also provided important lessons for future generations. The events of that day highlighted the power of nature, but they also illuminated the strength and resilience of the human spirit. The response from the Australian people was a testament to their ability to come together in the face of overwhelming adversity. As we reflect on the legacy of the Black Saturday bushfires, it's clear that while the pain of that day will never fully fade, the recovery process continues to inspire hope. The lessons learned from the fires have led to better fire management strategies, a more informed public, and a more resilient community. The survivors of the fires, though forever changed, have shown the world the strength of the human spirit and the power of community in overcoming even the most unimaginable challenges. Let us remember the victims, the survivors, the heroes, and the lessons learned from this tragic event. The Black Saturday bushfires may have devastated communities, but they also sparked a sense of unity and resilience that continues to shape Australia today. California is no stranger to wildfires. For decades, the state has battled these devastating blazes, but in recent years, the frequency and intensity of the wildfires have reached terrifying new levels. Wildfires are now a regular part of life in California, and the danger continues to grow. In fact, some of the worst fires in California's history have occurred just in the past few years. And it's not just the scale of the fires that's concerning, it's the fact that they seem to be getting worse, faster, and more unpredictable. Wildfires have always been a part of California's natural landscape, but the fires of today are different. The combination of extreme heat, persistent drought conditions, and changing weather patterns has created a perfect storm for these wildfires to spread uncontrollably. In 2023 alone, thousands of acres of land burned across the state, causing widespread damage and destruction. It's a growing crisis that's forcing entire communities to evacuate and is leaving families to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Let's break down some of the staggering numbers. In recent years, the state has experienced some of the largest wildfires in its history. Just in 2018, the Camp Fire alone destroyed over 14,000 homes and claimed the lives of 85 people. It was the deadliest wildfire in California's history. Then in 2020, the August Complex Fire became the largest wildfire the state had ever seen, burning over 1 million acres of land. Entire towns were leveled, and the devastation was unlike anything we had seen before. The immediate destruction caused by these fires is overwhelming, but the long-term effects are just as alarming. Not only are these fires taking a massive toll on human life and property, but they're also severely impacting California's environment. Wildfires destroy thousands of acres of forests, habitats, and natural landscapes. With millions of acres of land already scorched, the question is, how much more will burn before we see change? But the problem doesn't end with the destruction of the land. The economic cost is also staggering. Wildfires in California have caused billions of dollars in damages, far more than most people realize. From agricultural losses to businesses forced to close, the financial impact ripples through the economy in ways that aren't immediately visible. The losses affect entire industries, from the wine-growing regions in Napa Valley to small towns in the foothills. And let's not forget the cost of rebuilding, which can take years or even decades, with communities often facing months or years without proper housing. While the numbers are staggering, it's essential to remember that wildfires don't just impact the environment or the economy, they impact real people. These fires change lives in ways that can never be fully measured. Families lose homes, loved ones, and entire communities are uprooted. Survivors are left dealing with the emotional and psychological trauma of having their lives turned upside down. The impact on mental health is profound, and it can last long after the flames have been extinguished. The fear of the unknown, the anxiety of evacuation, and the devastation of loss weigh heavily on those who experience it. As we look at this growing crisis, it's clear that California's wildfire epidemic is not just a seasonal issue. It's a part of a much larger and more complex set of challenges. The fires of today are linked to the changing climate, poor land management practices, and our own human activities. Each fire is a warning sign that we need to take action. The question is, how do we respond before it's too late? As we continue, we'll take a deeper look into what exactly is driving the spread of these fires, and what factors are making California's wildfires worse than ever before. Stay tuned to learn more about the causes behind this devastating crisis. The causes of California's wildfire epidemic are multifaceted, and understanding what's behind the intensity and frequency of these fires is crucial if we are to have any hope of controlling them. While wildfires have always been a natural part of California's landscape, several key factors are making these fires more dangerous and harder to fight. One of the primary drivers of this crisis is climate change. As the Earth's temperatures continue to rise, California is experiencing longer, hotter summers and more intense heat waves. Over the past few decades, temperatures have steadily increased, leading to conditions where wildfires can thrive. The combination of higher temperatures and drier weather means that forests and grasslands are more prone to ignition. California's climate is naturally dry in many regions, but with climate change accelerating these conditions, fire seasons are starting earlier and lasting longer. Rising temperatures also contribute to the drying out of vegetation, creating more fuel for wildfires to feed on. This year, for example, California saw record-breaking temperatures in some areas, pushing the limits of the state's fire management strategies. The hotter it gets, the faster the fires spread, with flames consuming everything in their path. Another significant factor is the changing precipitation patterns. California has long been affected by droughts, but these conditions are becoming more severe. Droughts dry up rivers, lakes, and water supplies, and they also dehydrate plants, making them more susceptible to fire. The state has experienced extreme drought years in the past, but in recent years, these droughts have been more intense and longer lasting. Climate change has disrupted the natural water cycle, making it harder to predict when these dry spells will end, leaving California's landscapes more vulnerable to fire. But it's not just the weather. Poor forest management practices have also contributed to the severity of these fires. In the past, controlled burns and other fire management practices helped to clear dry vegetation and prevent catastrophic fires. However, these practices have not been consistently implemented over the years. As a result, forests have become overgrown with vegetation, creating more fuel for fires to spread rapidly. The dense underbrush and dead trees in California's forests have created a perfect environment for massive fires to take hold and become uncontrollable. Another significant factor is human activity. While many wildfires are sparked by natural causes like lightning strikes, a large portion of California's wildfires can be traced back to human actions. In recent years, careless behavior has caused several deadly blazes. For instance, campfires that aren't fully extinguished, discarded cigarettes, or even sparks from vehicles on dry roads have started fires that quickly spiraled out of control. Arson is also a growing problem, with individuals intentionally setting fires for a variety of reasons, sometimes out of malice or for financial gain. These intentional fires are often the hardest to contain and can lead to widespread destruction, as seen in the past with large-scale fires like the Thomas Fire in 2017 and the Kincaid Fire in 2019. The combination of drought, overgrown forests, extreme temperatures, and human activities has created a volatile situation. Each of these factors on its own is concerning, but when they all come together, the results can be catastrophic. Add in the fact that California's population continues to grow, and more people are living in high-risk fire zones, and it's clear that this crisis is not going to get better without significant changes in policy, fire management, and our collective behavior. What's even more alarming is that we are seeing wildfires spread more quickly and more destructively than ever before. The fires of recent years have torn through entire towns, leaving communities with little warning to evacuate. The Butte Fire in 2015 and the Camp Fire in 2018 both highlighted how fast and unpredictable these fires can be. Entire neighborhoods have been wiped off the map, and people have had to abandon their homes and their lives in the face of this growing inferno. In some cases, these fires have moved so quickly that people only had minutes to escape. With no time to grab personal belongings or say goodbye to their homes, the damage caused by these fires is beyond just the immediate destruction. Wildfires release huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, worsening global warming and creating a vicious cycle. The destruction of natural habitats also disrupts ecosystems, forcing animals to flee and sometimes leaving them without food or shelter. This ecological damage can take years or even decades to recover, with some species losing critical habitats forever. In the next part, we will take a closer look at some of the most devastating fires in recent history and the aftermath they left behind. These stories highlight the urgency of addressing the wildfire crisis and the profound impact it has on individuals, families, and entire communities. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the aftermath of California's raging fires. As the fires rage across California, it's not just the flames that leave lasting damage, it's the aftermath. The toll of these wildfires on people's lives, the economy, and the environment is immense and often irreversible. While the flames themselves are terrifying, the emotional and long-term consequences of losing homes, loved ones, and communities can be just as devastating. One of the most striking consequences of California's wildfire crisis is the human impact. Thousands of families have been displaced with no place to call home. When fires like the Camp Fire in 2018 hit, entire neighborhoods were destroyed. For the people of Paradise, California, the devastation was particularly heartbreaking. The Camp Fire was the deadliest wildfire in the state's history, claiming the lives of 85 people and reducing the town of Paradise to rubble. The survivors were left not only with the loss of their homes, but also the loss of their community and support systems. In the immediate aftermath of such catastrophic events, people are forced to leave behind their memories, their homes, and their lives as they knew them. The psychological toll of losing everything in a fire is staggering. The trauma of evacuation, the uncertainty of what the future holds, and the constant fear of more fires create a psychological burden that lingers long after the flames are out. The process of rebuilding isn't just about physical structures. It's about repairing the emotional wounds of people who've lost everything. Moreover, the economic impact of these wildfires is crushing. In addition to the physical destruction of homes and businesses, wildfires also disrupt entire industries, costing billions of dollars in damages. Agriculture, which is a key part of California's economy, is particularly vulnerable. Fires destroy crops, disrupt the harvest season, and damage irrigation systems, leading to massive financial losses. In the wine country of Napa Valley, for example, fires like the Tubbs. Fire in 2017 not only destroyed homes, but also devastated vineyards, causing long-term financial damage to the region. Businesses in affected areas face steep challenges in recovering. Many are forced to close their doors permanently, while others struggle to reopen, burdened with costly repairs, lost customers, and ongoing health and safety risks. With fires becoming more frequent and severe, it's increasingly difficult for communities to recover fully. The damage is not only financial, but also emotional, as people are forced to leave behind the places they've built their lives. The environmental consequences of wildfires are just as severe. When wildfires burn, they do more than destroy homes and infrastructure. They also damage ecosystems that may never fully recover. Wildfires release large amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which contributes to global warming. In fact, in some extreme cases, a single wildfire can produce more carbon emissions than an entire country's annual output. The wildfire season is now a major contributor to California's carbon footprint, exacerbating the very climate conditions that fueled the fire in the first place. Furthermore, wildfires have a profound effect on local wildlife. As fires tear through forests and grasslands, they destroy animal habitats, displacing or killing countless creatures. The Sierra Nevada region, home to rare species like the Sierra Nevada bighorn sheep, is particularly vulnerable. These animals rely on the forests for shelter, food, and breeding grounds. When their habitats are destroyed by fires, their survival is put at risk. Some species may be pushed to the brink of extinction as their natural homes disappear. The loss of vegetation and trees also leads to soil erosion, which can further damage the landscape. Without trees to anchor the soil, the ground becomes loose and more prone to erosion. Especially after rain, this can lead to devastating mudslides, which can flood already vulnerable areas, making recovery even harder. The fire-ravaged hills of California are at particular risk, as fire scars create conditions where heavy rains can lead to mud flows that destroy homes, roads, and vital infrastructure. Water quality is also threatened by wildfires. As fire destroys the land, the ash and debris flow into rivers and streams, contaminating water supplies. This can affect everything from drinking water to agricultural irrigation. The long-term environmental damage caused by these fires can take years to reverse, and some areas may never fully recover. Wildfires also disrupt wildlife migration and force animals to flee to other areas, putting pressure on ecosystems that are already under strain. These environmental impacts are not just immediate, they affect California's future. As wildfires become more frequent, it's clear that the state's ecosystems will continue to bear the brunt of the destruction. Rebuilding these areas, both ecologically and economically, will be a long and difficult process. Next, we will explore the efforts being made to tackle California's wildfire crisis. From firefighting strategies to climate policy, we'll take a closer look at the steps being taken to address this urgent issue. California's wildfire crisis is an urgent challenge, but it's not without efforts to fight back. While the fires continue to ravage communities, resources and strategies are being deployed to reduce the frequency, severity, and damage of these catastrophic events. The problem is complex, but there are critical steps being taken to address the situation from multiple angles, including fire prevention, firefighting, and long-term policy changes. One major area of focus is fire prevention. In the past, California's fire strategy primarily focused on firefighting efforts once fires had already started. However, experts have increasingly emphasized the importance of preventing fires before they spread out of control. Controlled burns, or prescribed burns, are one of the most effective tools in reducing wildfire risk. These burns are intentionally set under controlled conditions to reduce the amount of fuel, such as dry brush, that could contribute to a larger, more dangerous fire. Although controlled burns have been used for centuries, their implementation has been inconsistent, and many experts argue that more extensive and frequent use of this technique is crucial. Alongside this, forest management practices have been reevaluated. California's forests have suffered from decades of neglect and poor management, leading to overgrown trees, dead vegetation, and dry conditions. By thinning out dense forests, removing dead trees, and restoring healthy ecosystems, the risk of large uncontrollable fires can be reduced. In recent years, both the state and federal governments have begun investing in forest restoration projects, but much more needs to be done to manage the millions of acres of land that are at risk. A critical aspect of California's wildfire response is the firefighting efforts. The state has a robust network of firefighters, both professional and volunteer, who fight fires on the front lines. However, the increasing intensity and frequency of fires in recent years has stretched these resources to the limit. In response, California has been increasing its investment in firefighting technology, from aerial firefighting units such as helicopters and planes to more advanced fire suppression systems. These air resources can drop water or fire retardant to slow the fire's spread and give ground crews more time to control the flames. Additionally, California has also sought to improve its firefighting coordination. Wildfires don't respect state lines, and in many cases, fires have spread across counties and even into neighboring states. By improving communication and collaboration between local, state, and federal agencies, response times can be faster and more resources can be allocated to areas in desperate need. This coordination extends to mutual aid agreements, which allow fire departments from different areas to assist each other during major disasters. Technology has become a vital tool in California's battle against wildfires. Innovations like drones, satellite imagery, and artificial intelligence have been used to detect fires early, monitor fire behavior, and predict how fires will spread. The use of real-time data helps firefighters make better decisions on where to focus their efforts and how to protect lives and property. In particular, early warning systems have been improved, allowing residents to receive evacuation notices and alerts sooner. The state has also invested in fire mapping tools to predict where fires are most likely to strike, based on weather patterns, land conditions, and past fire history. Climate change mitigation also plays a major role in California's efforts to curb the wildfire crisis. As we've seen, rising temperatures, prolonged droughts, and changing weather patterns have created the perfect conditions for wildfires. To combat this, the state has made significant strides toward reducing greenhouse gas emissions and transitioning to renewable energy sources. California's climate change policies include goals to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 and increase the use of clean energy across the state. By addressing the root cause of changing weather conditions, California aims to reduce the frequency of extreme conditions that contribute to wildfires. Community preparedness is another key component of the state's strategy. California has ramped up efforts to educate the public about fire safety, evacuation plans, and the importance of creating defensible spaces around homes. Fire-resistant materials and building codes are also being updated to ensure new construction is more resilient to fires. In some areas, fire-resistant landscaping and the clearing of dead vegetation around properties are now mandatory to reduce the risk of fires spreading to homes. Despite all of these efforts, it's clear that California cannot solve this crisis overnight. Long-term recovery and preparation are essential. Rebuilding communities after fires is a lengthy process, and there's still much work to do in terms of restoring habitats, ecosystems, and the mental well-being of those who've lost so much. Moreover, the constant threat of future wildfires looms large. California must remain vigilant, adaptive, and proactive in its approach. However, there is hope. Communities in fire-ravaged areas are coming together to rebuild, stronger than before. There's a growing recognition that while wildfires will continue to be a part of California's landscape, we can reduce their impact and ultimately learn to live with them. By combining fire prevention, smarter forest management, improved firefighting efforts, climate change mitigation, and community preparedness, California can move toward a safer, more resilient future. This crisis is a reminder of how fragile our environment is and how important it is to take action. The wildfires of the last few years have shown us the devastating effects of climate change and poor management, but they've also highlighted the incredible strength and resilience of the people of California. The battle against wildfires is ongoing, but with continued effort and innovation, there is hope for a future where California's wildfires become less destructive and the communities they threaten can thrive once again. Thanks for watching. Let's continue this conversation. If you have thoughts on California's wildfire crisis, feel free to share them in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more discussions on environmental challenges and their impacts on our world.